Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host, Brett
Gilliland. Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Mark Sawyier with me. Mark, how you doing, my man? Good. It's good to be with you. Your wife was on the show on November 11th, my notes say here. So November 11th, 2024, Laura was here. We had a great conversation, and now here you are. You are the CEO and founder of Bonfyre. It's an award-winning employee engagement platform that helps customers like Medtronic, Duke Energy, MTM Health build high-performing cultures through its recognition and rewards and culture coach AI solutions for Microsoft Teams and Frontline. From New York originally.
That's right.
And then what happens, like all good guys, you come here, you meet a girl from St. Louis.
Well, actually, I met Laura in New York. So.
Oh, that's right. That's right. She was from New York. Usually what happens,
I brought her here. Yeah.
We'll blame that on you then.
That's right.
Well, man, like every show, I always start with, what's helped make you the man that you are today?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think two things for me. One, definitely family and friends. I mean, just, they taught me a lot about hard work, treating people right, and doing the right thing, even when it's hard to do. It's probably the most important time to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then I just, the entrepreneurial journey. I've learned so much about myself. What I'm capable of, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and how to build a great team. Because at the end of the day, you can't accomplish anything as an entrepreneur without a good team.
Yeah. Were your parents entrepreneurs when you were growing up?
No. My mom. My mom was a professor of art history. Okay. My dad was an attorney. So, but we've had entrepreneurs in the family here and there. So, a couple generations back.
So, walk us through the journey. I know you had some companies before Bonfyre. So, walk us through that and kind of what that journey was like, and how did that prepare you for what you're doing today?
Yeah. So my entrepreneurial journey began, aside from the kind of random projects as a little kid, like we were just talking about, selling stuff like on the street in New York. But, really it began at WashU as an undergrad. So I started a company called movingoffcampus.com. It was an off-campus housing website, grew well, helped a lot of people find apartments off campus, learned a lot, made a little bit of money. That led to my second business, which is still around today. It's a digital marketing agency called Decantery. It's run by a fantastic person, Josh Edler. I've had the privilege to work with for over a decade. And then, ultimately that led to Bonfyre.
Yeah. And are you still involved in the other one?
Still an owner and, certainly advise Josh, but, he's really leading that
He
business.
runs the day-to-day of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. What, for you, when you're doing what you do today, I'm always fascinated by these questions of like, what is it for people that makes them tick? Like, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis where it doesn't really feel like work to you? Like the time stands still.
Doesn't feel like work. Well, I guess in terms of like habits and routines, I'm definitely a creature of habit. So, fitness is a big part of my routine. Just what I do in the morning, obviously start with breakfast, but I'm always going to read the paper, typically for 20, 30 minutes. And then I guess in terms of the flow and, when I'm doing work that doesn't feel like work, to me, working on the kind of strategy for the product for the business, those are things where time will just fly by. And then also just, bringing Bonfyre to new organizations and talking to them about their goals, how we might be able to help. That's the kind of stuff I love.
Well, talk to us about Bonfyre. Like, what is it? I know I said earlier that it's you're helping all these companies with engagement platform. Mm-hmm. But what is exactly and what do you do, and what our listeners need to take away from that?
Yeah. Well, employee engagement can be a pretty complicated topic, but to me, if I were to distill it down into one thing, it's really all about how employees feel about their work. And at the end of the day, how you feel about your work is going to translate, of course, into how well you do your work. Do you stay at the place that you work, right? Investing discretionary time and energy and effort into your work. And so our technology, Bonfyre, it really brings together a lot of the core capabilities that leaders need and organizations need to build relationships, effectively communicate with team members, recognize great work, living values, et cetera, and several other capabilities. And it's fully integrated. I think one of the big things about Bonfyre is meeting employees where they are through the digital channels they're already using every day.
Yeah.
And so, Microsoft Teams, for our customers who are
that's what we use too as our firm.
Yeah. So, if that's the channel that you're already using every day to communicate with Bonfyre, you don't have to go anywhere else. Everything, your entire experience is contained in there. And they may sound like a small thing, but it actually makes all the difference in the world in terms of people actually adopting and using.
You got to leave and go to another app. That's a pain.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So what does that look like? So let's say I'm communicating, you and I are coworkers, or maybe I'm your manager, or vice versa. How are we communicating through Teams, and what are we actually looking for in there that's going to help drive?
With Bonfyre,
with Bonfyre,
Right. Well, so the other, I think, important aspect of Bonfyre is we've got all these tools, but as you probably know, right, like having tools doesn't necessarily mean that you actually use them.
Right.
And so our Culture Coach product helps leaders take advantage of the capabilities that we have by sending them what we call nudges, which are basically recommended pre-built actions to help them build relationships, recognize great work, et cetera, that they can take right from Microsoft Teams or our Frontline Employee app in just a couple clicks.
Yeah.
So really, the Bonfyre experience is it's in your workflow as you're currently, already communicating with your coworkers. And our Culture Coach product is going to suggest actions at the right time that you can take right from there.
Yeah. May need to call that client another time, or may need to do something like that for accountability.
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, I would say, the recommended actions, and this is something that, to our knowledge, is completely unique to Bonfyre, because we're actually providing the tools to take the actions that we're suggesting. We can also measure whether or not they happen and how successful they are. So, you don't have, a manager doesn't have to go like check a box and say that they did something, or, et cetera. We're going to serve up those actions for them to take.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Talk about, the business plan, whether it's for this company or the other two companies, how much effort and energy you put into the actual business plan versus just the freaking will to get it done and never stop until it's successful? That's
a great question. I would say one of the biggest lessons I've had from being an entrepreneur is the only thing you know about your business plan for sure is that it's wrong. At least in the very beginning stages, right? So, I would say so much of what I've learned in the Bonfyre story too, a lot of it has been about grit and just kind of pushing through it. Our original business is not, or how Bonfyre started is not what it is today. We originally started as a private social networking app for events where you could, for like a wedding or a concert or anything, you'd be able to have a space where you could share photos and communicate with people that you didn't necessarily want to become Facebook friends with.
Okay.
That led us to corporate events. And then we found that about 25% of our corporate event customers would keep using the app to communicate after the event was over. And that led us to employee engagement and eventually where we are today. But as you may, be thinking, right, like with the pandemic, events went away.
Right.
And so, that was a big hit to our business. But in the end, we launched our Microsoft Teams app, we launched Culture Coach. And so, perseverance and grit. I mean, I think Paul Graham, I don't remember the exact quote, but somebody I certainly follow, and so much of success in business is just staying in the ring, and that's, I think, part of our story.
Yeah. How do you stay a student in the game today when you think about that, whether that's, just as a leader, but just as a business owner, entrepreneur, what are the things that you're doing?
Yeah. Well, I think doing it, as you were kind of alluding to, right, is a big part of learning. And that's, I think, actually one of the greatest gifts of entrepreneurship is, you get this incredible experience where there are lots of highs and lots of lows, but at the end of the day, like, it all comes down to, are you learning from the mistakes that you inevitably make? But, other than that, I mean, I'm staying tuned into, of course, like industry-related news and analysts and that kind of thing. But like how I built this podcast, for example, it's something that I, like to listen to, kind of hearing other entrepreneurs' stories. So that's a main source for me.
It's amazing, isn't it? All the stuff you can find out there and just learn for free.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Incredible. What do you do from an accountability? Keep yourself accountable and keep yourself, like, all the things you've got on your plate. Like if you ever read that book, The Juggling Elephant, right? He's got all these plates in the air. Like, what do you do to hold yourself accountable? I call it self-management, not time management. What are some things that you do that you could help our other leaders listen to this today?
Yeah. Well, something that I've been doing for, really since the inception of Bonfyre, is a quarterly investor update. Every single quarter, come hell or high water, I'm sending out a written update that talks about recent progress, milestones, and then also what our plans are for the future. And so that in and of itself creates a pretty good accountability loop because, every single, 90 days, there's a written record of what we're trying to accomplish. In terms of kind of the week in and week out stuff, so we of course have metrics that we track internally at Bonfyre at the leadership team level and then also at the team level. And so we're reviewing those on a regular basis. But in terms of my kind of own individual work, I try to break up my work days into kind of like different categories of work. So some of it's going to be more task oriented for example, from a sales standpoint. I'll block out time and specifically knock out tasks related to that. And then I'll have other time blocked out on my calendar where it's more working on the business as opposed to working in the business.
Yeah, which is a big deal, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people, in my opinion, 24, 25 years in the business, everybody wants to work in it, right? They don't ever step away. Like, I think that's one thing we've done successfully over our career is getting out of the business once a quarter. Mm-hmm. So I'll go to the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton, St. Louis, go to a nice spot, something that's inspiring, right? And then actually unplug and only dream and think about what's next. Is that something that you've done in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, switching up the kind of modality, where you are, but also for me, it's also probably the kind of the work that I'm doing. A lot of it can be pretty creative. I mean, especially when you're working on, if at least in the work that I do, when I'm talking to somebody about bringing Bonfyre into their organization, like some of these large companies, like you mentioned, it takes a lot of time and energy to really make sure that what you're, what you're offering is actually a fit for their business, but then also, how do we communicate that in a way that they're going to understand very effectively? And so, if a lot of that is writing and, coming up with, images and kind of design assets, right? And if I'm not, I might be working on it and have writer's block, and so going and working on something else gives me, I'll often figure out what I want to do when I'm doing something else. And so when I get stuck in something, I'll typically gravitate towards tasks that I know that I can complete in a shortened period of time to sort of like build up a little momentum before going back to the challenge that I'm facing. Is
that checking the box, getting something done motivate you?
Yeah, definitely. I think like, starting your day, I think, people say like, make your bed in the morning or, it's sort of like the more you can start your day with achievement and accomplishment, even if it's small little things, it sets you up well for the rest of the day ahead.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. I talk about it and I've got this journal that I've created that is like that. Win the day, right? Win the morning, you're probably going to win the day.
Yeah.
If you win the day, you could probably win the week. You win the week, you can win the month, the quarter, the year, the decade, right? And it can go on and on and on. But if you bring all that back, how do you have success over a long period of time? It's, in my opinion, how do we start the day? Mm-hmm. Right? Because you can't just wake up and say, okay, 20 years from now, I'm going to be here. We can think that. But to your point, the business plan's like, yeah, right. You're not even going to be doing the same thing you thought of. So it's the morning. So talk about that morning habit, if you can, in detail, what that looks like and how you become this guy that accomplishes a lot.
Sure. So I do make the bed in the morning.
Yep. Same here.
As a thing.
Our rule is last one out of the bed has to make the bed.
Yep. So I eat breakfast every morning. Some people I know, they might skip it or whatever, but to me, that's sort of, I will make my breakfast. I'll do the dishes kind of at the same time, then start.
What are you eating?
I alternate. So I typically will eat like a whole bunch of egg whites in the morning, or I'll do basically a shake that I make with fruit and protein and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, while I'm eating, I'm going to take probably between, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and I'll maybe look in my inbox, but most of the time I'm just reading the news. And I oscillate between different periodicals, but and then I'll go and I'll start my day. So that's typically the morning. Sometimes I'll have a workout in the morning as well. I typically go 3 or 4 days a week. Okay.
And when do you do that? Usually in the morning, always first thing before work?
Actually, usually it's in the morning, but there is one day where I'll go in the afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, I struggle with that. I find it's like, I was just talking about this actually at my lunch meeting on the way back. We were saying, I love the guys and gals that can get up at 5 and 6 in the morning, and I've tried it I'm just not that guy.
Yeah,
I find myself pissed off like after doing it a week. I'm like, I'm tired, I'm cranky, and
right.
So I found that I've got to do it when it works for me, right? And build it into your schedule.
Yeah, you want to have a good workout.
Yeah,
and like if you can get up at 5 or 6 in the morning and and have a great workout, good for you. But for me, I need a little more time.
Yeah. Do you do anything else like pickleball, basketball, anything like that?
I used to play basketball. I just turned 40 recently. I haven't been playing in a little while. I go running. It's another thing of mine, and then just get outside. I live right near Forest Park, and so being able to just get out and like walk around, that's something I love.
Feels good that we can do that again, isn't it?
I know. Yeah. It's one of the things I love about St. Louis. It's like in the middle of winter, you'll just get the random week in this case of wonderful weather.
Yeah, it is nice. Yeah, you can be snowing one day, and then you can be on the golf course the next day.
Right.
Talk about so people talk about thinking big, right? And I've talked about it my whole career as well. We want to think big, extremely big. I do. But I also want to start small. So when you hear that, like what comes to mind for you? How have you been a thinker over the years to build the career that you've built?
Yeah. And actually, think big, start small is one of our values at Bonfyre.
Oh.
So there you go. So the question, I guess, is how do I go about doing that? I guess I'd say a couple things. I think when you're thinking big, it's important to not throw out ideas at the outset. Obviously you want to have a field of play, so there are parameters, you want to set up around coming up with big ideas and, what's valid criteria, right, for example. But, whether it's an individual or a group setting, something that I find kind of effective is if you put the topics that you want to generate big ideas around, have different exercises where you have people on your team. We would do this when we would go in person. You'd write down individual ideas on a note card. You'd give everybody 10 minutes to write them down. They'd kind of put them up, and then everybody would have an opportunity to put theirs on the wall and talk about each idea. So that way you're getting everybody to participate, but you're also you're casting a pretty wide net in terms of what's possible related to the big idea. But then start small. That's where you got to take the big idea and funnel it into what's practical. What can we actually achieve or accomplish in the near term? And so that's where I think those parameters have to really show up because big ideas are great, but if they're not viable, then you could just waste a lot of time and energy spinning your wheels.
Just dreaming. What I love about that is I think as a leader, it's I'm humble enough to know that I don't have all the ideas. If I'm working for you, right? If I'm working for Mark and you say put your idea up on the wall, that tells me that you value what I do, right? And I think that's a big deal, man, for people. So have you always done that? Is that just part of who you are, as part of your DNA?
For me, I think it comes from, I put a lot of trust in my team. And actually, if I were to say, speaking, of employee engagement in Bonfyre's business, at the end of the day, all the things that we do, if you were to boil it down into one thing, I think it comes down to building workplace relationships and trust. And so, whether you're having people, whatever your work setup is, people are in the office, especially if they're remote or hybrid, right? Trust is the currency of how everything gets done. Right. So, I think that's where it really comes from. Like at Bonfyre, our policy, we have something called 10% time. So basically we give every employee in the organization Friday afternoons. They can spend that time how they see fit. We generally encourage them to spend it on development related activities, but they can also just take the time off for wellness if they need it, or they can, go spend it doing community or philanthropic type things. But, that's an example where it's to say, look, I trust you to get your work done and do it well. And if you need to go do something in the middle of the day, go do it. Yeah. And so, I think trust starts there, and then it can grow into something where you're empowering people to come up with ideas, et cetera. Yeah.
It's funny you say empower. I hired my first assistant at 23 when I probably couldn't afford an assistant. But I'm like, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. Let's hire for that stuff, and have had that mindset. But that's the word I actually used back then, was empower them to do it, right? Because it was one of those things is I could easily teach you how to go do this, and I could do it for you, but then I'm kind of micromanaging you, and I don't want to do that. And so let's dive a little deeper into that. When you talk about empowering your people, like how are you doing that? How are you building that into the culture that you guys have every single day at Bonfyre?
Yeah. Well, I think some of the examples I just shared, right? Like, it starts with trusting people to just you set up goals and you know what people are supposed to work on, and you don't micromanage them. At the end of the day, we're incredibly fortunate to have the team that we have at Bonfyre, and so if you're on the Bonfyre team, whether your role is an engineer, you're in customer success, marketing, whatever it might be, we brought you on because we believe you're going to be an incredible contributor in that particular area. So I think it just starts with sort of acknowledging that. In terms of how it kind of shows up on a daily basis, let's take engineering and product, for example, at Bonfyre. I'm not an engineer myself. I know a lot about our product. I know a lot about how the technology works. But at the end of the day, I'm not in there writing code. So when it comes to prioritization or, if an issue comes up or anything like that, I may come with a perspective, but ultimately I'm going to be very careful about framing my perspective in a way where I'm inviting others to challenge it and to offer something different. And part of how you ensure that people do that is that when you kind of begin that process, you validate it by actually, changing direction, or, instead of it being whatever perspective the CEO came into the conversation with, you're going to leave with a different direction because your top engineer told you this is the better path.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ways.
And again, I think being humble enough to take that feedback, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about how to go in there and do the coding. Here's what I think. So how do you come up with your ideas? Because I think that's part of the job as a leader, right? An organization. How do you come up with those?
Yeah. A few things come to mind. I think a lot of them are just around just being a sponge, so being constantly tuning into our competitors, analysts, just kind of what customers want. And related to that is being very close to customers and prospects. So, that's part of why I still do sales for Bonfires, because it's important to me to be on the front line engaging with prospects, because that's ultimately where that's the bleeding edge of the product, and whether or not, you have product market fit and people are going to purchase.
Well, you have the best engineers in the world. If you don't have any sales, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. I think it's just staying really tuned into that, and then also going to your team, and whether it's exercises like I described of, here's what we're after, let's go, everybody brainstorm ideas, et cetera. We can vote and, select things. But I think a lot of it is just being really tuned information, and having data to make decisions. Yeah.
It's kind of where I want to go now is I always say the most dangerous place on earth, right? And people start thinking about, you fall into a volcano or, all these crazy things you could think of. But I think the most dangerous place on earth is right here, right? The spot right between our ears is our own minds, right? Because that's where we're there all the time, every single day, going to bed at night, getting up in the morning. How is your game on self-talk and believing in yourself, trusting yourself, taking the action to go do the things that you can do? How is that self-talk for you? I
guess what's coming to mind for me is sort of when the real tough challenges come up. And, I think, I think everybody has moments where they question, are we going to make it through X, Y, Z? And are we going to be able to solve this problem? And, you go through stages of how you react and respond to the problem. At the end of the day, I guess my approach, right or wrong, is I just wrestle the thing to the ground. I play out scenarios, I guess is what I do in my head when it's tackling a particular challenge. In terms of, maybe zooming out a little bit further, around self-defeating thinking and what do you do about that? That will encroach in my mind every now and then, but there's a couple things that I think you can do to overcome that. One, I think, is going back to something we talked about earlier, which is get some wins, get some, if you're grappling with something really complicated and you're not seeing a solution, you think, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to solve this. Go work on something that you can solve, because one, your brain actually will keep working in the background on the problem, and two, you'll build up a little more optimism and motivation. Secondly, related to that, I think, is looking for opportunities to source optimism and, what are good things? Because the good things, the momentum, the positive things going on in your business and your life, translate that into fuel to go, battle against the big problems. Yeah.
So do you have a process like that? For me, I'll share mine. So if I have this fear, and I always talk about the fears, obviously your false evidence is appearing real. And so when you think about those, I don't spend much time in pity party land, right? So bad news happens, man, that sucks, but we're going to move on, right? And then I go straight to these journals, and then I just start writing down, okay, here was the issue, here's how the hell we're going to fix it, right? So is there anything like that in your world that you're doing to get past those little pity parties?
Yeah, I don't journal quite as much, but it is, I guess in terms of things I will write down, one of the things I'll start to do, like if I don't have tasks that are immediately teed up for me to go work on to sort of complete, I'll then go, okay, what's the rest of my to-do list for, the rest of the day or the rest of the week? And that'll be a good opportunity to like get back into that. And then, for me, whiteboarding, I have at my home office and then also at our office in St. Louis, I've got whiteboards, of course, and I'm definitely a bit of a visual person. So being able to draw and sort of sketch things out helps me work through problems.
So I think it's funny you say that. So I'm a big believer in that too. Whether it's your journal or your dry erase board thing, whiteboard thing, isn't it? You're in the world of building apps, right? But still, at the end of the day, what do we do? Old school. You go back. I think there's power in writing down stuff. Agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely agree. And even though I'm in the digital space, power of in-person human connection is extraordinarily important.
Yeah. So talk to us about AI. Obviously it's getting bigger, and the novice folks like ourselves, we're aware of the Chat GPTs of the world and things like that. Where do you see that, maybe 1 year from now, not just Chat GPT, just AI in general, 1 year, 5 year, maybe 10 year from now? What role is that playing in our everyday lives?
Oh, man, it's a big question.
It's a $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion question, right?
Many people smarter than me have, been asked and answered. I guess, my perspective on it is I think it is going to be, it's going to be enormously disruptive. I think that in the next, 1 to 2 years, 3 years, I think that a lot of, it's going to increase productivity for workers, but I think a lot of jobs, a lot of roles are going to be eliminated. And, yes, I think that other roles will emerge as a result, but and again, I'm not, an economist.
Sure.
I don't have the sort of macro, all the details, but my instincts tell me that unlike when past technological revolutions have come and it's really created new roles, I'm not sure it's going to be the same this time. There will be new roles that are created, but I'm not sure that they're going to be equal to the roles that are being displaced.
And people are saying it's going to be bigger than the internet. Obviously, the internet is unbelievably successful long term, right?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, tools I'm just going to speak about one particular part of it, which is, how does it do the magic that comes up with words on a page? And at the end of the day, it's predicting the next word in a sequence until it completes whatever the task is. And the prediction is going to get increasingly accurate as, you pump more data into it and, as other people use it more, so on and so forth. When that starts getting integrated into, other real life things like voice and, video and sort of other mediums, I guess. I think it's just gonna keep exponentially getting more powerful, more important.
Yeah, you already see the memes out there. The press conference of people, they'll change the words. It looks like it's real, man. That's what scares me about it in the future.
Totally agree. Back in the early days of Bonfyre, like I mentioned, we created it as a private social networking app for events, the very beginning. Part of the motivation was to create a better private social networking application, period. Because, looking at where we are now, our ability to discern what is real, what is truth and what is actual real information, I just don't know if that we're biologically equipped to deal with AI videos that look like they're extremely real. Everything, all five senses, or not all five, I guess, but several of our senses are all telling us wow, okay, the video looks real. The audio sounds like the real person. Their lips are moving in a real way. I can't visually see anything that looks off about this video. The content seems a little strange.
Yeah.
But everything else looks real. I'm deeply concerned about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary.
Absolutely.
It's also, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think I read somewhere that was the Golden State Warriors, even the AI or the virtual reality world that's out there. They're going to start selling tickets. If I'm wrong on this, maybe it's some other team, but this is what I think it was. So like, I have the actual season ticket for the physical game, but now these headsets, you can get a ticket and then you can physically walk into a locker room after the game. You can go to the press conference and it looks like you're really there. Like that's the stuff that's crazy to me.
That could be interesting.
Yeah.
That could be interesting for sure. I think we're also going to see, I mean, obviously some companies are going to do really well. I think we're also going to see some failures. One of the ones that comes to mind, I've been like reading a lot about, we don't do this at Bonfyre, but AI sales development representatives who basically are, automatically going out and sending emails. And I mean, can you imagine, right?
Yeah.
Like how many junk emails do you already get now?
Right.
Now, we're going to have AI creating these things and calling us on the phone. I mean, I'm not excited about that, but I think that's not going to work too well.
Well, it's funny because I don't know if you have an iPhone or whatever, but the new email system, it's taking me a while to get used to it. But if you go to your normal emails, mine's on the left, but then you get all the promotions, all the other junk. It's like, it's amazing how much simpler my email has got on the personal side. So I'm anxious to see all that stuff as well. So talk to us about, I see here you're you're an avid traveler, you're a space and sci-fi fan. Talk to us about the importance of traveling, even from a leadership standpoint. What I mean by that is, yes, we want to go spend time with your wife, right? I want to go with my wife and kids and create experiences and all that stuff as well. But the power of traveling to get out and kind of re-engage, replug in, recharge yourself, how important is that to you?
Yeah. I certainly, at least my work style, I'm not going to say always on, but, it's one of the gifts of being an entrepreneur, I guess, is when you're doing something that you love. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're working on Saturday or Sunday or whatever. So traveling really does create more time and space to really unplug and get away. And especially when we go international, I just turn my phone is off, airplane mode, for the day because the time zone difference. And so, that's a really important thing, just unplugging and recharging. I think also, kind of like we were talking about before, new settings, new environments. Again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm pretty sure, there's, it's been shown that those like stimuli will help you stimulate new thinking, new thoughts, right? And so similar to how going and working in a coffee shop randomly in a day can help you, going and traveling somewhere new can help you as well.
Yeah, it's it makes me think too, as I travel, and you can see things, man, that you're just like, God, you thought you were successful in your own little world, and then you go and you expand that and you see things like, wow, like that's possible, right? That's possible. So future trips, man, where should we be putting our bucket list? If you had to share one or two trips, somebody listening to this would be like, you absolutely got to go check it out. Where would it be?
Bucket list trips. So trips that I've gone on? Or,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Well, ones you go on, and then maybe one that's on your bucket list.
Sure. Okay, well, one place that's very near and dear to my heart and also my wife's heart, there's this little town in southern France called Roquebrune. I have some family ties there. We actually got married there.
Oh, wow.
And it's just like, it's an incredible place to be. So that one, and it's 20 minutes from Monaco. So, I mean, you can see it from there, but also not a lot of people know about it. So it's sort of like a great place to stay. And then in terms of, trips that are on my bucket list, there's many places. I guess if I'm picking one that just comes to mind right now, we've been talking about going to Switzerland.
Okay.
So
I've heard it's amazing.
Hopefully we do that at some point soon.
Been to Bora Bora?
No.
Should
I add that to the list?
Well, I don't know. Those little, I don't even know what they call them. Those little pod things.
Oh, yeah. They do look cool.
Yeah, they look cool. So I don't know. It's just a long time to get there for me.
I think, I totally agree. I mean, for me, I mentioned my mom was a professor. She's an art historian. So I love going to places where there's a lot of history, even if it's not art history, but just history of the place that you can engage with. So
you're probably the guy that can go and take your time and read all the signs and read all the history. Is that true?
I don't always read all the signs, but I definitely will read them when I can. And, having somebody if you can, and, we of course don't do this all the time, but, if we're going somewhere really special, investing the money to have someone who is from there, who really knows the history and the stuff, like, it's nice to walk around a museum and look at beautiful art and go, oh, wow, that's really nice. It's a whole other thing if somebody who actually knows a lot about it tells you about it.
Right. And you just sit right there as investing the money. Where have you invested money in yourself that you think has really paid off, 10x?
Oh yeah. Well, certainly my health and fitness. I invest a lot of time and money in that. So that's been a huge thing for me.
Can you paint a picture for that? Like, what is that? Like, what do you say? I've invested a lot of time and money. Obviously, there's equipment and stuff you can buy, but what else?
So I do personal training. A couple days a week. I'm going, I go running. I mean, I guess you could say, there's a money component, but a lot of it is just the time.
Yeah.
And then also the diet and, making sure that those things are aligned. Certainly my education. I was very fortunate to go to an incredible school, WashU, which, obviously my parents helped make happen. But that was a huge, investment that paid off big for me as well.
Yeah. Were you, I haven't asked this question in a while, but I've thought about it the other day, and this is a question where I'm asking the question, so you would not be arrogant enough to say it this way, but are you surprised by your success, or is this kind of what you thought? So if I went back and talked to the 17, 18-year-old Mark, would he have said, man, I'm going to be that successful? Or what would you say?
Man, 17 or 18-year-old Mark. I guess...
Because 17, 18-year-old Brett would be shocked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think part of me would have been shocked, but I guess, my approach to starting my first business, moving off campus.com, was just, here's an opportunity and I'm going to go do it. And, one foot in front of the other. So, I guess I had always envisioned that I would have some modicum of success, but, it was, I guess, it's interesting to think about. It was more about just, can I achieve the thing that can I bring the thing that I'm envisioning into the world, I think is really what I'm trying to say. And, financial success is the result of having success with that, is sort of the way I look at things. Yeah. I don't wake up in the morning every morning and think I want to make a lot of money. I wake up in the morning and I think, how do I make Bonfyre a great company and a great product, and money, comes from that.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great answer. So, how often do you think about failure is going to be the question. But the reason I ask that is, I spend a lot of time in my days talking to advisors that are at other firms, and they're going to come over. The number one thing is always they think about failure, right? Oh what if my clients don't come with me, blah, 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 blah. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about failure. It's there, but I guess I just trust myself, I know the grit, you used that word earlier, the grit I'm going to have to get there. How often do you think about failure? And if that comes into mind, how do you flip that switch to move on to the success side?
I think for me, it depends on the type of decision or topic we're talking about, So for example, if we're talking about, let's take Bonfyre post-pandemic, like I mentioned, right? Our events business completely went away. That was our sales engine. Yeah. We were, it was an existential threat to our business. And so at that point, it was a lot of big idea thinking and, how do we navigate this moment successfully? And so, in those kind of, I guess in that lens, a fair amount of time was spent thinking about, okay, if we go this direction, what could go wrong? If we go that direction, what might go wrong? Now, thinking about what might go wrong isn't necessarily dwelling on,
sure,
and letting that prevent you from moving forward. It's more like, are the risks that we identify things that we can reasonably overcome? Like, how might we go about that? And are they far outweighed by the opportunity? Yeah. So that's, I think that's one way to look at it. But when it comes to things that are more like a couple layers lower than that, where it's not quite a reactive decision, but there's things that are coming up in your business. I think, entrepreneurs generally by nature are going to be more optimistic people. And so, I think you focus more on what's good, but it's important to have people around you that will ask the question, well, what could go wrong here? If nothing else, just to help identify and mitigate risk.
Yeah. And as a leader too, for you, how much does transparency and vulnerability play a role in your life? Because what I have found is the more transparent and vulnerable I am with others, they're like, somebody else feels that way too, right? And there immediately becomes a deeper connection. So how does that play out in your life for you?
Huge. huge. I would say it's probably the most important, I mean, going back to what I was saying before, like if you boil employee engagement down to one, if you had to boil employee engagement down to one thing, I would say it's trust or relationships. And so, when you have the dynamic between a leader and, a direct report, it's so important I think, for leaders to be transparent and vulnerable, because that's one of the most important signals that you can send to an employee that there's trust there. Mm-hmm. So, how do we do that at Bonfyre? I talked about things like 10% time, like total flexibility with PTO, or you got to go do something, go do it. I trust you to get the work done. And then also, the same quarterly updates we send to our investors, we share with our employees. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody knows how we're doing. When there's bad news to deliver, we share it. If there is bad news, and we make sure that people understand it and have the opportunity to ask questions. And that's just kind of that's just how I'm wired.
Yeah. Is there anything that comes to mind for you that you said, man, I'm hell bent on this. Like, I know this is going to be successful and it just didn't quite work out the way you thought. Anything there that you can share? If not, that's okay.
No, I'm just thinking. It was hell bent. Maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, because it's a tough question. Because I was actually, before I even asked it, I thought to myself, how would I answer that? But I ask it anyway.
Well, one thing that comes, this is like moving off campus, first business I created. What part of our business model was basically, if you rented an apartment through our website, we would pay you $100. And then when you asked for your $100, we would then bill the property owner $300. I actually had to become a licensed real estate broker in 40 states or something like that in order to do this. I'm doing this out of my dorm room, So that was going, I'm thinking college kids, you want to get $100.
Absolutely.
Great.
I'll do anything for $100.
Yeah, right. And so that was working great. And then the problem came when I tried to collect on the money that was owed by property owners, because they were like, oh, you're just some college kid in your dorm room. So, plenty of people did pay, but a lot of them, stiffed us and that kind of thing. So, sometimes I don't know. The lesson from that, I guess, was it was I don't know.
No, it answers the question, because it's like an idea that just sometimes, my point to this is, we talk about the circuit of success, right? We talk all about our successes. Yeah. And I think it's okay to hear from other leaders that you had this idea, it didn't work, let's share it and we move on, right? It doesn't mean it's over and you're terrible and you're not a leader. It's like, it didn't work, man. Who cares? Move on to the next thing and see where we go from there. So, last kind of questions for you here is success. When you think about success, and I think back to the Brett of the 23, 24-year-old Brett, how I would have defined success then versus now the 47-year-old Brett, how do you define success as we sit here today?
The main thing, I think, is looking at the kind of totality of the experience that I've had as an entrepreneur. I ask myself questions like, have I learned from the mistakes that I've made? Am I making new mistakes? Because if I'm not making new mistakes, chances are I'm not challenging myself, or maybe I'm not, learning new things. And in my particular case, is that we've only got so many trips around the sun, and, I want to spend time working on projects and companies that are going to leave the world a better place. And so, to me, Bonfyre fits that bill. And so waking up in the morning and thinking, so success to me is, it's not just about the money you make. It's also about the things you're working on and what's the impact in the world. And that's what I think about.
I love that answer. And it leads me to my last question. You see, this is on your microphone and mine, this F greater than P. And so what that talks about is our firm, my personal mission, our firm's mission is helping you achieve a future greater than your past. And that's what I get up every day. It's like, how can I impact the world, right? Steve Jobs, you say, how can you make a dent in the universe, right? Mm-hmm. How do I impact the world? So how do you see a future greater than your past? When you hear that, what's it mean to you?
Yeah. I think a lot of what comes to mind is things we were just talking about, accumulating knowledge and wisdom through experience. So to me, the future being greater than my past is, I've accumulated wisdom, and what I mean by that is that I'm making decisions and I'm doing things informed by the past. So I think that's one big part of it. I think specifically for Bonfyre, future the greater than the past. I mean, our business is better than ever. And when I look out to the future, I think it's just living into our mission of, we want to create workplaces that people love and help more companies do that.
Awesome. Where do our listeners find more of Mark Sawyier?
Well, I guess you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't do like Instagram or any of that stuff. But LinkedIn, you can find me. And then also, of course, our company website, bonfyreapp.com.
Awesome, man. Well, Mark, thanks so much for being with me on the Circuit of Success, man. It's been awesome having you.
It was great to be here. Thanks.